It's okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to our Football Berkeley class. Today we're doing quick and easy meals. This is a class we've done in different variations.
It's muted. I sent people are asking if they can talk. You need them.
Oh, that's me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, please, yeah, don't worry about that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for looking out. So today the theme of quick and easy meals is basically like minimal prep time, one pot or one pan, and then throw it in the oven or on the stove and it will kind of cook itself. I've done other versions that were like no cooking at all. So if you're interested in that, you can check out some of those recipes. Or just like a really quick, pan fry of something. So we have all kinds of options out there for you, but that's what we're doing today. And because everything is quick and easy, we actually have 3 recipes for you. Usually we only have time for 2. So we have a 1 pot burrito bowl. We have a sheet pan gnocchi. I want to say skillet, not skillet. And then we also have a veggie pot pie. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. All right, so the first thing that we're gonna do, I guess I should introduce myself. I don't think I did that yet. My name is Kim Geff. I'm a dietitian with the Well at Work Wellness Program. And this is, I think, my 12th year doing cooking classes here. So that means we have lots and lots of recipes available on our website if you want more ideas. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is the burrito bowl. So basically what we're doing is cooking the rice and the vegetables and beans with all the spices in the pot. And then we're gonna chop up the toppings, the fresh toppings, while it's cooking. So you can make this in an Instant Pot, which is where the original recipe is from. It's from a website called Okonomi Kitchen. Or you can cook it on the stovetop, which I actually prefer. I think you can have a little more control over how it cooks and you can check on it. And I think it's honestly faster than the Instant Pot. But because we don't have a lot of space, I thought I would just show it in the Instant Pot today. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is saute the onion. And in the Instant Pot, you can actually saute it in the pan. So sometimes you'll see recipes that are in a slow cooker or Instant Pot that have onion. And you can just throw the onion in raw, but I think it makes a big difference to saute it first. It really has better flavor. So it takes a little more time, but I think it's worth it. So I'm just gonna dice up half an onion here. I'm gonna use a white onion, but you can use whatever you'd like. And we're gonna saute it in a little bit of oil. So if you were to do this in a pot on the stove, it's basically just the same steps so far. Create my little compost bowl. Okay. And for oil, you can use canola oil. We also have grapeseed, sunflower, any kind of neutral cooking oil that can handle high heat. The exact amount of oil doesn't matter too much, but you want about a teaspoon to kind of coat the bottom and give the onion something to cook in. And I just want it to sizzle a little bit, so I'm going to let it get a little bit hotter. But meanwhile, we can get everything else ready. So we're going to also add bell pepper. And I'm just going to take out the seeds and the white parts. And the bell pepper, especially the red ones, provide some vitamin C, which is not too hard to get enough of, but when you pair vitamin C with a plant-based iron like beans, it actually helps you absorb it. Because plant-based iron is not as well absorbed as iron from animal products, but it's usually not too hard to find a tasty source of vitamin C like bell peppers or strawberries or tomatoes to help improve the absorption. Okay, so the little onion I threw in there is sizzling, so we'll throw the rest of it in. And we'll just let this saute for a few minutes, but that gives us a little time to get everything else ready. Okay, so we are also going to add 10 ounces of corn. This could be from a can. This would be a little bit less than a can, like 2/3. Or you can use frozen corn, really whatever your preference. You can also use fresh, of course. You can always use fresh. It will just take a little longer. And it might be kind of hard to find fresh now as we're entering fall. So we'll just keep an eye on the onions and get them a little bit browned. You just want to stir them every few minutes or every minute or two to make sure they don't burn. So with the Instant Pot, you don't really get to control the heat too much. It's on saute. If you're cooking on the stove, you have a little more control. Okay, so the other things we're gonna add are 1 cup of salsa. If you get a jar like this, it's usually 16 ounces and 1 cup is 8 ounces. So you'll need about half a jar. So I already used half of it, so I know I need the other half. I'm also gonna add some diced green chilies. These ones are not spicy, but if you want, you can get jalapeno. I made everything mild today, but if you like spice, like I do, you can feel free to make everything spicier with a spicy salsa or jalapenos or your seasoning blend. You can add more chili powder or add in some cayenne or other dried chilies, ground up dried chilies to make it spicier. We're also gonna add some rice. So I'm using a long grain basmati rice today. It's white rice. So if you do want to use something like brown rice, it takes quite a bit longer to cook. So I haven't tried it myself. You wouldn't be able to just substitute it and have it cook the same. So it might take more water, it might take longer. So I can't guarantee that it would work as well. But honestly, with this recipe, with the beans, the vegetables, the corn, we have quite a bit of fiber. So you can rest assured knowing that you're still getting a good amount of fiber and nutrients from this meal, even with the white rice. And yeah, again, the theme is, oh, my head's in the way. Quick and easy meals. So the white rice does cook faster. I also have a taco seasoning blend. So if you happen to have taco seasoning mix, you can use that. But if not, you can make your own blend. On the bottom of the recipe, I put the quantities you would need for 1 batch of this. So we have a tablespoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of ground cumin, a teaspoon of paprika, half a teaspoon of dried oregano, half a teaspoon of salt, and half a teaspoon of black pepper. But if you have, your own seasoning blend that you like to use, or you want to change out the spices, you're welcome to do that. Okay, so that's starting to brown a little bit. So we'll just give it another minute or so while we make sure we have everything else ready. We'll also need some water. Okay, so we're gonna use 1 cup of water, or you can use broth. And if you have broth that's kind of salty, just be mindful of that when you're making your spice mix. So, you might want to adjust the salt quantity if you're making your own mix and you have like a salty broth. I'm a big fan of the bouillon paste because it's very concentrated. You just need 1 teaspoon per cup of broth. So you can just mix this with water. Since everything's going to get mixed up anyway, I'm just going to throw it right into the pot rather than mixing it with water. So we'll have that ready to go. But yeah, 1 jar of this makes 38 cups of broth. So, you can buy those quarts, that's totally fine. You can make your own. You can use canned, but this is like a really space efficient way to always have broth ready to go. Okay, So hopefully you can see on the camera that the onion is starting to brown and develop some flavor. I might, if I was making this and I had more time, I might do a few more minutes just to get it nice and browned. But in the interest of time, I'm just gonna kind of throw everything in the pot and the onion can continue to cook a little bit on the bottom. So again, we're adding in the bell pepper. And we're gonna add some corn. 10 ounces of frozen corn. Mine has thawed, but you don't necessarily need to let it thaw first. A cup of salsa. And the can of diced green chilies. And let's give that a little stir. Okay, and then, oops, all the spices. Put that in. And this broth, so it's a little hard to get out. Or the bouillon paste. That will get kind of mixed in when we add the liquid. Okay, and then we're gonna put the rice on top, and I already washed this rice. It got kind of stuck together as it dried. The rice on top. And we just kind of want it to be spread out evenly. So that when we put the water on top, all the rice will be covered. I'm gonna kind of push it.
Could we put in the bell peppers at the same time as the onions to get them a little softer?
Yes, you definitely can add the bell pepper earlier. But this is gonna cook for about 20 minutes, I think. So, if it's on the stove, it's faster in the Instant Pot, but, I personally like the bell pepper a little crisper, so you can definitely adjust it to your preferences. Okay, so now we're gonna turn on the Instant Pot. So all these steps will be the same if you're making on stove top, except at this point, you would put the lid on, reduce it to a simmer, and cook it for 16 to 20 minutes, but you can also check on it and give it a stir if like the rice isn't cooking evenly. Okay, so now we are going to put it on high for 10 minutes. Okay, so that's cooking away. I'll do the toppings for the burrito bowl afterwards. Okay. So the reason why this can take a little longer is it can take like 7 to 10 minutes to build up pressure, and then it's going to cook for 10 minutes, and then we're going to release the pressure naturally, which can take another 10 minutes or so. So it's actually a little faster to cook on the stovetop, but you know, if you prefer this, then you're welcome to do that. Or if you just don't have a lot of room in your kitchen, you can use the Instant Pot. Okay. So next, we are gonna make the veggie pot pie. Make a little space here. Okay. So, this recipe I've made 5 times now. Each version was a little different. The original recipe is from a website called Plant U, and the way they made it in the original recipe looked so cool, where basically they threw everything into a casserole dish and put puff pastry on top and threw it in the oven. And that worked okay, but I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna add an extra step where we're gonna cook everything in the pot first. So that we have a little more control over how thick it gets. Because with the original recipe, the issue I found was that sometimes the cornstarch would settle at the bottom and then the top was kind of runny. Because usually when you cook with cornstarch, you're stirring it into something hot, and then the action of stirring it and the heat combined is what helps it thicken. So the first step is to preheat the oven to 375. And then I'm going to use the skillet like this. So I'm actually going to cook the entire thing in the pot. So that makes it a 1-pot meal. You don't have to do that for the batch that I made for you all. Actually, I just poured the mixture into a casserole dish and then baked it. Or you could pour it into a pie dish would be ideal, because that would be the right shape. But basically, we're just gonna throw everything in here and heat it up real quick. So I'm using frozen mixed vegetables. And you can, use your own blend of frozen vegetables. You can use fresh. It doesn't really matter. We just want about 1 pound. And we want stuff that's not gonna release too much water, because that will make it watery. So these ones are carrots, corn, peas, and green beans. So they're already a little bit cooked or blanched, so we know there's not gonna be too much water coming out of there. Okay, so we're gonna heat that up. And okay, and then we're also going to add a can of white beans for some protein and some more fiber. But you could use a different protein if you want. And let's see. So then for the liquid, I'm going to use soy milk. The original recipe called for a can of coconut milk, which you could also do. That's also really quick and easy. And it's very, very rich. So if that's what you're going for, you can do that as well. But I found it to be a bit too thick in my opinion. So I'm going to go a little lighter and do a mixture of soy milk and water. And I think you could probably use any plant-based milk or cow's milk if you want. But if you use a plant milk, just make sure you find unsweetened and unflavored, because a lot of them have flavoring like vanilla, which would not taste too good in a pot pie. And a lot of plant milks, even when they say original, they actually have sugar added. So, I don't think this would taste good with the extra sweetness. So I'm gonna leave that out. Okay, so I have 1.5 cups of the plain unsweetened soy milk. And I like soy because it's really creamy, it's a pretty neutral flavor, and it adds a little more protein too. And then we're gonna also add 1 cup of water. And then to thicken it, I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup of cornstarch mixed with a 1/4 cup of water. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure that out too. And that's gonna help thicken it. Okay. I can stir this. Okay, so you want to give it a stir right away, otherwise it will kind of cement at the bottom. And then right before you add it, we'll give it another stir because it will start to settle. And the reason we mix it with the water is to prevent clumping. Okay. All right, so then for the spices for this one, you can see there is a lot, right? So this is gonna give the dish a lot of flavor. And I think this is important, especially when you're making things that are plant-based, to find other ways to make it interesting and make the flavor more complex. So what we have is 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, which you can skip if you don't have it or you don't like the flavor, but it'll kind of give it like a cheesy, savory flavor. We also have a tablespoon of dried thyme, which might seem like a lot because dried herbs are pretty potent, but I find that it actually is the right amount. But you can cut that back if it's a little too strong of a flavor for you. We also have a tablespoon of dried minced onion. So of course you could use fresh onion that you saute first, but in the interest of keeping this quick, I'm using the dried minced onion. You can also use onion powder, but I find that hard to keep at home because it always clumps up and then it's useless. So I like the dried minced onion. We also have a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of turmeric, which you don't necessarily need to add that if you don't want to, but it gives it kind of a nice yellow color. I also tried cutting the turmeric in half and the color was kind of unappetizing. So I would say either go all the way or not at all. We also have some sage, which gives it kind of like a nice fall, wintry, cozy element. There's a teaspoon of dried sage, half a teaspoon of black pepper, half a teaspoon of garlic powder. So we're just gonna add all that in there and give it a stir. And usually home stoves are a little more powerful than what we have here. So hopefully if you make this at home, it will be a little bit faster. But you can see now that I've added all the spices and herbs, this is getting a lot more interesting looking. And I always talk about this during these classes, but I'm a big fan of buying your spices and herbs in bulk if you have that available to you. They have that at Sprouts. They have it at Berkeley Bowl where you can actually bring your own containers, which is what I love to do. And just to give you a couple of examples, most of the spices and herbs that I buy there in these size jars are under $1, so it can save you a lot of money, especially if it's something that you're not going to use very much, like the dried sage. The dried herbs weigh hardly anything, so sometimes it's 20 or 30 cents, and that's more than you would need for one recipe. So that can save you some money and help reduce waste too. Like, let's see, this here's some oregano, and I've already used some of it. You can see there's still quite a bit left. That was 20 cents. So you can save some money. And it's fun to bring your own jars and fill them up. It takes a little more time, but then you get home and everything's already in a jar ready to go back in your spice cabinet. So basically once this starts bubbling, which it's just starting to do, I'm going to add the cornstarch. But real quick, I'm gonna get the pie crust ready. The original recipe called for puff pastry, which I used, and it was delicious. So you can do that if you want something a little more decadent. But I found that the puff pastry didn't keep as well the next day. It doesn't really stay crisp. It gets kind of soggy. So I think pie crust lasts a little longer. I don't know if it's necessarily more affordable or what, or easier to find. Maybe it's a little easier to find, but I would say just go with whatever your preference is. But if you're making this as a kind of make ahead meal, I would probably go with the pie crust. So I have, I got this box of frozen pre-made pie crust. There were 2 in here, and they come and they're already round. So that makes it nice and easy. Whereas puff pastry is usually in rectangles. So that would work better if you're making like a square or rectangular casserole dish. But since my skillet is round, I'm just gonna stick this right on there when we're ready. Okay, so this looked like it was bubbling. It looks like it's on. I'm gonna wait for it to bubble a little bit more. But yeah, again, you can make it this way, or you can transfer this to whatever baking dish that you want to use. It'll just dirty an extra pan. All right, let's go ahead and add the cornstarch mixture. And you'll see that right away, this is going to start to thicken. And basically we want the consistency of a thick soup. And it might be a little bit too thick. If it is, I would just add water about a tablespoon at a time till you reach that desired consistency, which if you haven't made pot pie before, you might not know exactly. But basically you want, like right now it's too thin. It's just kind of running off the spoon, right? I don't know if you can see that. So we want it to thicken more. But we don't want it to be like able to stand up if you were to pile it up, right? We want it to be like a thick soup. So we just need to heat this a bit more to get it there. Yeah, I think the stove is a little bit weak, so it's taking a little longer than it would on a home stove. Cool. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say here. Yeah, but this is, it's a complete meal. We've got vegetables, we've got protein, and we've got starch in the form of a pie crust, plus the corn and the beans. So it's kind of everything you need, but And it serves, I would say, 4 to 6 people. So if you want to make it an even bit more complete meal, you could just add an extra side dish to it. Okay, so this is starting to thicken a little bit. I don't know if you can tell. Before it was pretty watery. Now it's kind of like a medium soup. So I would say it's getting there. Okay. That's looking pretty good. So I don't know if you can tell. It's, yeah, kind of like a thick cream soup right now. It coats the back of the spoon. So that's what we want. Because when you bake it, it's also going to thicken a little bit more. Okay, so let's turn off the heat. And we're going to take the pie crust. And we're just going to pop it on top. I usually don't worry too much about sealing it because the pot is hot. So most importantly, don't burn yourself, but it will kind of bubble up a little bit, but I think that's okay. But something that I'm going to do to add a little extra nice touch is to make an egg wash substitute. And you can do that with a combination of 1 part of each of oil or melted butter or vegan butter if you prefer. Agave or some kind of liquid sweetener. The sugar will help with browning. And the soy milk or whatever milk that you use for the filling. You can also definitely use egg or make another egg wash, but I find this pretty easy to use the ingredients that we already have on hand here. So then we're just gonna brush it on top. And again, that will help with browning of the crust and making it kind of shiny. But this step is optional. You can also just skip it. Okay. All right. And then the last thing that you have to do is create a hole for steam. Otherwise it will bubble up quite a bit in the middle. So I'm just cutting a little hole on the top for the steam to escape while it's cooking. And then just throw it in the oven for about 45 minutes or so. Keep an eye on it, make sure that it doesn't burn. And this recipe does take a bit longer. The prep is easy, but you also want to let it cool for a little while because it will be kind of runny at first. So you probably want to let it cool for at least half an hour. So maybe it's a good like Sunday afternoon meal kind of thing rather than a quick meal that will be ready on a weeknight after work. Okay. How are we doing? We still have 20 minutes. Okay. So the last recipe we're going to do is the sheet pan gnocchi. And I read about this concept online and people are raving about it because usually you have gnocchi that's boiled or cooked in the skillet and it has more of a squishy texture. But when you bake it in the oven, it actually creates a texture that a lot of people prefer, which is soft and kind of doughy in the middle, but browned and crispy on the outside. So if you prefer that, this is one way that you can do it. There's lots of sheet pan gnocchi recipes out there, so if you want to try something different, feel free, but I'm going to just kind of show you the general concepts. So basically what we're going to do is add a bunch of vegetables along with the gnocchi, including cherry or grape tomatoes. And those are going to burst and kind of create the sauce for this. I did add pesto to your sample, so you can add pesto if you want. But if not, it's still pretty saucy with just the tomatoes bursting and the olive oil. So we're going to use half a red onion. And you can use whatever onion, but the red one does look nice when it's roasted and with all the other colors. And we're just gonna thinly slice it. And I'm gonna remove anything that looks kind of papery because that won't roast very well. So I would slice it pretty thin. Because this is only gonna bake for about 20 minutes. And we don't want big chunks of raw red onion in there. And we're also gonna do 2 bell peppers. So I have 2 different colors, which you can do if you want, or just choose whatever color you like. But I always like to make things a little more colorful. Okay, so in case you're wondering, the Instant Pot just reached pressure, so now it's gonna cook for 10 minutes. And then we'll release the pressure. There's a lot of ways to cut bell peppers. I don't know if one is better than the other. This is how I like to do it. I just cut it in half and then kind of take out the seeds and everything. And then we want 1-inch chunks for everything. So I'm going to cut each piece into about a 1-inch slice and then cut them into chunks from there. And all this is going on the same pan, so we can kind of mix it up. Okay. Throw everything into a big bowl so I can toss it, which if you're in a hurry, you can just, throw everything together on the sheet pan, but I feel like this does help you combine it a little more easily. And if you like these bowls, we actually got them at the East Bay Restaurant Supply and they're really cheap. They're stainless steel. I bought one for myself at home so I could feel like a professional chef in the kitchen. I think I got a smaller one for $5. So it does sometimes make cooking a little more fun and easy. So anyway, next we're gonna add the tomatoes. So just a pint of cherry tomatoes. Make sure we get them all. Then we're also going to add 4 cloves of garlic. We're gonna dice those up and throw it in here. I guess technically the bowl makes it not just a 1-pan meal, so you can skip the bowl if you want to stay true to the title. Although I don't think this one is called a 1-pot meal specifically, so it's just quick and easy, yeah. All right, garlic, and you can also add other things to this recipe, like if you want more of a concentrated protein source, you could add beans or chickpeas, you could add meatballs or sausage, and you could use a plant-based one if you want. I've seen a lot of recipes online use a sausage that people kind of crumble by hand and just throw on the sheet pan. So if you want to try that, you can. I've also seen a kind of a fall vegetable version with butternut squash and sage. So if that sounds good, you can try it. I imagine it's not quite as saucy though, so maybe you just want a little sauce to go with it. Okay, so 4 cloves of garlic are going right in. I wouldn't mince it too finely because we're going to roast this and garlic can burn easily. So it doesn't have to be too finely chopped. 3 sprigs of rosemary, which you can also omit, but does give it a nice flavor. You can omit it, especially if you're using the basil pesto. I didn't, so if you like that flavor, you can add it. If you didn't like the flavor of the rosemary, then you can just leave it out. We're gonna add half a teaspoon of salt. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball. And a little bit of black pepper and some olive oil. Okay. You just need a 1/4 teaspoon black pepper. And 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm also just going to eyeball that. This doesn't really have to be exact because you can also add a little more olive oil at the end to make it a little softer or saucier. And then I'm going to use a 1-pound package, or it's a little under a pound of shelf-stable gnocchi. This one does have wheat in it. So it's not necessarily gluten-free if you need that. But it's mostly made with potato. And I'm gonna throw it in there. The recipe is from the kitchen and that they put on there that it could be frozen gnocchi or what's the other one? Or fresh. I've only made it with this, so this is the only one I can vouch for, but I'd say it works pretty well. I think frozen sounds a little tricky, but I think it'll probably be okay. Okay, so we have everything in there and we're just gonna toss it. You can use a spoon, but since I have this big bowl, I might as well just toss it like this real quick. And you just want to get everything coated. And then we're gonna roast it on a baking sheet. So the type of pan you use does matter. If all you have is a round baking sheet, that's totally fine. But if you want it to be nice and crisp, whenever you're roasting really anything, you'll get it crisper if you use a flat baking sheet like this, like a cookie sheet, and if you don't crowd the pan. So I would actually use 2 baking sheets for this recipe. And since I'm not actually going to bake it right now, I'll just show you. Let's do half of it so you can see how it would look. So that's about half of it. So what happens if you crowd the pan is that everything steams each other, basically. So the first time I made it, I put everything on one pan and it was okay, but I didn't get that nice browning that I think is really what makes this dish tasty. So, yes.
I've cooked with herbs like that and they end up burning or just getting really singed.
Mm-hmm.
Any recommendations for that? Would that happen with this or no?
It didn't happen when I've made it because this only cooks for about 20 minutes. If you're roasting like some root vegetables that take 45 minutes, an hour to cook, that's probably when it burns. So I think getting some oil on there helps and putting it kind of on the bottom and putting it in the middle. So usually things cook faster on the perimeter of the pan. But it might mean just if you're cooking something for longer, just keep an eye on it and take it out halfway or so. But yeah, that's a good question. So that's kind of about as crowded as you want the pan to be. You kind of want a little space or, you know, as much as you can, like a little space between everything. And you might have to separate some of the gnocchi by hand. And that's going to get you the best results instead in terms of the roastiness, if that's a word. I don't think that's a word. So that would be half of it. So then you just bake it for, I think it's 18 to 20 minutes. And then you can add any of the optional toppings. Lost a tomato. So I just bought store-bought pesto. You can make your own, but I like pesto on it for a fun sauce. You could add marinara sauce. You can add cheese. You could add, the recipe says burrata, which you would tear up and immediately throw on top. You can add Parmesan. You could add fresh basil that's sliced. You could add red pepper flakes, whatever you want to make it tasty at the end. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. So the last thing I wanted to do was just prep some of the vegetables or the burrito bowl. So here you can also do whatever you want. But I'm gonna add lettuce, tomato, avocado, and green onion, which is what you had in your samples. We also added, or we had available some cheese and sour cream. We used a plant-based one, but you can use a dairy-based one if you prefer. But I just wanted you to get that full experience of tasting everything together and seeing if you like it that way. So I'm just gonna dice up the green onion. And we want the green parts, the darker green parts. So I like to start from the ends, the green ends, and just kind of work my way down and slice it up till I get to the light green part. So, you can definitely eat pretty much the whole thing, but the flavor gets a little stronger at the end, and it's better to eat this part cooked. So you could save it for something where you're going to cook it, or cut it first and throw it in to the pan when you're cooking the other onion. Then for the lettuce, I have the head of romaine lettuce that we already washed. So I'm just gonna kind of slice it up from the top to kind of shred it. And then I'll cut it into smaller pieces. But if you want to save time, you know, you could buy lettuce that's already cut up or shredded. That's totally fine. That aside. And then the tomatoes, I'm just gonna dice. So I like to just cut each one into a little slice. And if your knife isn't very sharp, it's a little tricky, but sometimes I use like this bottom corner of the knife to get in there and start the cut. But you can also use serrated knives to cut tomatoes, and they do a good job, similar to bread, of cutting it without kind of squishing everything. That's a little trick you can try. Okay, tomato, and then also some avocado. So when you cut avocado, make sure you don't cut it in your hand, which I know is very tempting, and I might do that sometimes, but what you really want to do is put it down on the cutting board and slice this way, because it's very easy for the knife to accidentally go through and hit you in the hand. And apparently that's a common thing they see at emergency rooms. They call it avocado hand. So you can imagine what I mean by that, right? So don't do that. Keep your hands safe. And then we'll just scoop this out. Okay, so those are the toppings. And this, I think, just finished 1 minute ago. So in the interest of showing you what it looks like, we can vent it, and that will release the pressure more quickly. But it's steam, so you have to be very, very careful. Steam is hotter than boiling water, right? So it might sputter a little bit. So what I would do whenever I do this is I use something like a wooden spoon to hit it rather than my finger. And then, I also would cover it with a towel if it's sputtering a lot. This dish didn't have a whole lot of liquid. But once the little indicator, at least on this version of the Instant Pot, goes down, that means that the pressure is released and it's already down. So I can tell that I can open it easily and it's ready to go. Okay. Let's give it a stir and see how it looks. You know, basmati rice tends to be, it's usually like a little bit drier, so it probably is going to be a little dry. But we're going to stir it up to try to keep it, or see how it looks. And if it's a little dry for your taste, you can, at this point, you can throw in a little water to kind of re-moisten everything. But that's kind of why I like to cook it on the stove, so you have a little more control over the liquid. If you don't add enough in the Instant Pot, it'll actually notify you if it's going to burn. So you'll get a little warning. You can try to resolve that, but luckily that didn't happen. But tell it's a little tiny bit burnt on the bottom, but not too bad.
If you cook it on the stove, you have to add more water to the knife, or is it the same ratio?
I use the same amount because you also cover it and simmer it. But you can also keep an eye on it. So if you notice that it is drying out a little bit more, you can always just add a little water. And usually when you cook rice, you don't want to stir it. You want to leave it undisturbed, right? But I think in this case, you can give it a couple of stirs and the texture is still going to be okay, since it's already mixed with a lot of stuff. But basically that's how it would look. And then you can assemble your bowls. And this one is also good for meal prep. I would probably just have this in one container and then put all of your cold toppings in another and reheat that and then assemble it when you're ready to go. So those are our 3 quick and easy recipes. And our next class is going to be in November. It's fall and winter seasonal vegetables. And then for the holidays, we have a holiday treats class, which is always my personal favorite. I think it's most fun. But we also have a raffle for those of you here in person. So today we're giving away two reusable shopping bags that are very cute. I think one is a